Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I am starting a reading vlog. This time I am reading books that were recommended to me by a bookstore. And now I will say they were not personally recommended just to me as an individual, they were recommended by the bookstore as books for people to pick up and read. And I thought it would be fun to include all of them in one video. So there are three lovely books, including The Rainfall Market by Yu Yong Guang, The Night Librarian by Christopher Lincoln, which is a middle grade graphic novel, and also The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. So the bookstore that I'm referring to is Dymocks, which is one of our biggest bookstores here in Melbourne. And the way that all this came about, so I follow Dymocks on social media, I get their emails, etc. The Ministry of Time was their best book of last year, I'm pretty sure. So that's how it got on my radar. I know a lot of people were talking about it towards the end of the year. I heard about it a little bit before then as Dymocks was releasing their best ofs. And I became very intrigued. So I ended up picking up a copy of it. And I thought, you know, that was it. That was this book was not the source of inspiration for this video. Then back at the end of December when I went to spend all my book vouchers that I got over the Christmas period, and I was doing that in the lead up to the new year. I was heading into the city and I was just kind of browsing through Dymocks' Instagram page, and the next two books popped up as books that they were talking about, and that's kind of what inspired me. I ended up picking them up on that trip. It was in my summer vlog. These two books in particular were ones that I did see on their Instagram page, and then I went looking for them in the store just to, you know, see what the fuss was about. So the first one being The Rainfall Market, which is the book that's been translated from the original Korean. I'm really intrigued by this. I'm actually going to start this one today because I've been dying to read this since I brought it home. It has literally been sitting in my TBR basket staring at me. It's been at the front the whole time. I keep moving it and then I'm like, no. It's such a beautiful looking book and I'm keen to get into trying some more translated work. So hopefully this works for me. All I know is it's kind of cozy fantasy, bit of magic-ish stuff going on in the background, but I just want to read it. And then the other one was The Night Librarian by Christopher Lincoln, again, graphic novel. This one intrigued me because the color palette is fairly monochromatic in terms of it's blue or it's kind of this green tinged yellow. It was recommended. It's set in the New York Public Library. I thought this would be a great one to take in for the classroom. After I read it, I have to see what it's like. So the only connection these books have are that literally Dymocks advertising and social media intrigued me enough to buy them. And that's the premise of this video. That's where we're starting. And as I said, I'm going to be starting with The Rainfall Market. I am back. I finished The Rainfall Market. One thing I will preface while I'm filming this little clip is if you can hear the wind, for some reason my apartment has decided to sound like a wind tunnel. But anyway, The Rainfall Market. This is a really interesting little story. I don't think it's going to be for everyone. And for me, it was about a 3.5 star book, and which is totally fine for me. And we have Saren, who is a girl, I think she's in late high school. She's getting ready to think about what she's going to do when she finishes her exams and whether or not she's going to be able to go to university. Her life has not gone according to plan, at least in her mind. Her mum has to work long hours in her job. Her sister has supposedly run away. Saren doesn't have any close friends. She's really passionate about learning Taekwondo, although she feels really self-conscious about learning Taekwondo, especially when she can't do things that she thinks she can. And she's heard these rumors about the Rainfall Market, which is a place where if you write down your misfortunes, you could be sent a ticket to attend the next market, which happens during the rainy season. So she does this, she gets an invitation to the market, she ends up with this gold ticket, and there she begins to meet all of the different characters that exist in the Rainfall Market, and they're seen as otherworldly. But her goal, while she's at the Rainfall Market, she can only be there for the duration of the rainy season. If she doesn't find what she's looking for before the end of the rainy season, she can get stuck there. But they have orbs that contain the potential lives that you might like to lead. So she sets out to try and find the life that she would like to lead and maybe uncovers a plot that's happening inside the Rainfall Market at the same time. Now, this is a book that is not subtle in its messaging. It's very much a case of we don't always know what we have in our lives, and that when we are feeling the pressure and when we feel like things are really tough, all we can see are the things that are really difficult and the things that are preventing us from moving forward. And part of Saren's journey is realizing that you can't just pick up someone else's life just because it looks like they have everything together. You may not have the full story. So it's that kind of messaging. But a really cool concept, and you have the little cat, which I think is Isha, and this is a little helper along Saren's journey. But Isha is a cat that just eats non-stop, and also when it falls from a height it gets larger. So it's a quirky little quirky little thing. But I really liked the concept of this. Do I think it's the best thing ever written? Probably not, but I like the concept of it. And it kind of reminded me in a lot of ways of the Night Circus and something like Caraval, where you have that invitation only sort of thing and you're figuring out how the world works as the character is figuring out how the world works. It was just a really delightful little afternoon read, so I cannot complain about picking this one up. It's still fairly early here, but I have a few things that I need to do this afternoon and dinner and things to sort out, but I will probably read The Night Librarian tonight as well, because why not? Let's get a head start on this. So I will check in with you when I have read The Night Librarian. I'm back because I finished reading The Night Librarians by Christopher Lincoln. So again, middle fiction, graphic novel, very interesting little story. So this one is set, I think I said, at the New York Public Library, and we are following Paige and Turner, who are brother and sister, and they are often on their own a lot. Their parents travel a lot for work, and their dad likes collecting rare books. And so at this particular time, Paige feels very unwanted by her parents, and so she has taken her father's very expensive original first edition of Dracula out of their home and taken it to the library. She wants to find out how much it's worth. And it's while they're at the library, which is one of their favorite places to go. It's one of the places they're allowed to go without question from anyone. Their Dracula book escapes. They meet the night librarian, whose job it is to make sure that in a place full of books, full of magic, full of characters who spend a lot of time around one another and occasionally like to escape, that they don't escape and that they don't cause havoc. And so Paige and Turner end up helping her, along with some literary side characters who you might be familiar with, including Tinkerbell and Jim Hawkins, Alice from Wonderland, and Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk, and a few others. Dracula's also a character in the story, as well as some characters from some other well-known books. And they are racing to try and put things to right before the library is destroyed. So it was a really fun little adventure story, and it goes through a lot of classic books, both children's and adult titles, so very well-known titles. And it's kind of a middle fiction graphic novel for people who really like books and who like the magic and the power of books. So it was a really interesting read. I'm really glad that I read it. And I was reading the author's note from Christopher Lincoln at the back, and the first line of it says, "So here I am on the doorstep of my debut graphic novel at the unexpected age of 71. Kudos to you, Christopher Lincoln, because that's amazing. But the thing that I really liked, and I think I shared this on Instagram, in the very last paragraph, so he's got his acknowledgements, who it's dedicated to, etc. And then it says, "Oh, and absolutely no thanks to those who aim to censor books and deprive young, curious minds, especially books telling truths about Black history and the LGBTQ+ community." So double kudos for including that in your acknowledgements. That's amazing. So I am going to take a break from reading for the rest of the night. I might put something on TV. I've got to do some editing. And tomorrow I'm going to read The Ministry of Time. So I'll update you when I have read that. So I apologize about the lighting. I have not got the lights set up or anything because I wasn't going to update you until I finished reading The Ministry of Time. But there we go. There's the colours. This book, I'm only 20 pages into it, and I just sent a message to some friends and said, I have no idea where this is headed, because, you know, I don't read synopsises or reviews or things like that for these things, because otherwise my thing with that really is that it can put me off from picking something up. So it's just often better to go into things blind and go from there and go on gut feeling. But the writing in this, I have no idea where it's going, but the writing is great. And Kellyanne Bradley is a British Cambodian author. So there's a really interesting snippet at the front because her character is also British Cambodian, and she is a civil servant who's gotten a job working for the Ministry of Time. And her job is to be the bridge between expats from different parts of history that have been pulled through time travel into the future. And they are individuals who have died in their own timeline, and so bringing them into the future shouldn't affect anything, which is a really interesting concept. And there's some really interesting things said initially about time travel, and the fact that, you know, the British government discovered time travel. They weren't looking for it, they weren't experimenting with it, but they discovered it anyway. And now they're just pulling people out of history to see what happens. That's their experiment. So there's obviously going to be some things to do with that. So far, we do not have the name of the civil servant from her perspective, and we've met Graham Gore, who is a man from 1847 who she's working with as the bridge, and they've just literally gone back to the place where they're going to be living, and they're housemates. Her job is to explain the 21st century to him, including things like, yes, an unmarried woman can live with a man and it's not seen as scandalous because you can say that you're a housemate. Yes, smoking has gone out of fashion, but I read that you are a smoker, so here's the pack of cigarettes, etc. I'm just so intrigued, and I've already done a lot of tabbing, and I'm not using my usual system, mostly because, as far as I'm aware, this is a standalone. So I've pulled out one of my really colourful sets just to match it to the cover, and so I'm just alternating between the colours, so hopefully I end up with a colourful rainbow just like the title. Sometimes I have a process, sometimes I just go for aesthetics, but I'm loving this already. And I've been talking about it for 3 minutes, so I'm going to go back to reading, and the next update will probably be when I'm done. Hi everyone. So I have finished The Ministry of Time, and I really enjoyed this book. It's going to be one that I'm thinking about for a while. It's such an interesting book because it takes the sci-fi element of time travel, blending it with a historical story, because Graham Gore is from 1847, and there's information in here about the real Graham Gore, who was part of the 1847 trip to the Arctic Circle, and sort of what happened to that lost Arctic exploration trip. And then you do have a very slow burn romance in here, but this book is not a romance. And I was doing a quick search on YouTube because I just wanted to see what some other people were saying about the book, just because I was trying to make sure that I had made sense of it in my head. And someone had a clickbait title of "Marketing lied to us, this is not a romance." There is a romance in here, but it is not a romance book. And this book probably does the best example of a romance in a non-romance book that I have read in a long time, because I think it's really hard to do. It's an incredibly slow burn romance between our female narrator and Graham, and we never get her full name in this book. In fact, he calls her Little Cat, and for the most part that's the name that we have. And the story is told from her perspective. She is writing to someone telling the events of what happened. So occasionally she interjects and says, you know, and we would learn this later on, etc. And then you also have snippets of Graham's narration, but it's Graham's narration from his original timeline. And I found that so fascinating, and I would be really keen to listen to this on audio. I've heard that there are 2 narrators for it, and that the narration is meant to be quite good. So I would be keen to go back and listen to it, because I enjoyed the story that much. I'll come back and revisit it at a time. Like, there are all these tabs in the book. There's only a handful that marked, and by handful I mean like maybe 3 or 4 that marked significant events or key information that I wanted to keep track of. The rest of it is just writing. The writing style in this is beautiful. Kellyanne Bradley's writing style is amazing. And I will read you probably my favorite little section at the end. But the other thing that this book does is it talks about racism from the perspective of a British Cambodian woman who doesn't consider herself other in any way. She's a civil servant, and she's been raised to just grow up in the world that she exists in. And you have other characters calling out some of her choices, and like, she doesn't make the best choices. She makes some really ridiculous choices throughout the book, but she also doesn't have all of the information that she needs to make decisions. And as one character tells her throughout the book, she is very young, and the questions that she's asking and the things that she's doing show that she doesn't understand yet. And a big part of this book is dealing with time travel. You have all of these expats who have been pulled through time into the present day. They're having to acclimatize, and all of their relationships are amazing. I haven't even talked about them. You also have this threat, and we don't know where the threat is coming from. We don't know whether it's coming from the past or the future, and we don't know how it all links together with how the British have ended up with this time travel thing. So it's really cool. Like, it's the kind of science fiction that I like to think about. It's really interesting because it does look at politics and governments and what governments do behind closed doors that we don't know about, and how that affects everyone else, and how they move people and position people as pawns in their game or their narrative or what they're trying to achieve. And so all of the expats, who there are originally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, they're all very distinct personalities. They're all from different points in history, and 3 of them become really close: Graham, Arthur, and Maggie. And our narrator becomes really close with all of them as well. But because of the way that everything is being maneuvered, and the fact that our female protagonist, she is working for the government, she knows more things than she lets on. There's only so much she can tell Graham, even though she is his bridge, and everything that she tells him has consequences for future actions and things like that. So I'm not making a lot of sense, because the whole thing is just a book that you kind of have to read and sit with and process as you read it, because it is very much learning as you go. The characterization is really great. Like, Graham as a character is a really intriguing character because he's a guy plucked from the 1800s, and with that comes not a lot of awareness of what is considered contemporarily appropriate in the present day. But he's a very charming man. He enjoys learning. He's very calm and centered, but we also know that he's very capable and competent because we know he rose through the naval ranks during peacetime in the 1800s. And he has a past, and there's things that he's done that he's not proud of, but there's also things that he's done in order to be able to continue to cope and move forward. Our female protagonist, in a lot of ways, I suppose, maybe isn't as developed as that, but we're in her head, and as I said before, there's a lot of things and a lot of pieces of the puzzle that she's missing, and in that sense it works really well for this narrative because you have that juxtaposition of the two characters, and then you have softer characters like Arthur, who is just absolutely precious and queer and unsure of how he now fits into this world because he wasn't safe being queer in his time, but also now he doesn't know where he fits in this world because he's been plucked out of everything that he knows. And then you have Maggie, who is from the 1600s and is also queer and is just so willing to engage with this new world that she finds herself in. And then you have another male character who is kind of the opposite of all of them, in that he upholds the ideals of patriarchal male-dominated society, but he's still a character and fully formed on the page. So like, it's really interesting. And as I said, I did like the romance, but it's a complicated romance. And it doesn't have an HEA. It might have the potential for one, but it's still important to the story and it still adds to it. And it's just so fun reading about how it all comes about. I will say, if you do pick it up though, in terms of a pacing kind of thing, this took me a lot longer to read than, say, a normal book. The first half of the book is, I don't want to say dense because it's not. It's very much about our main character helping Graham to acclimatize to the new world, and we get subtle hints that things aren't quite right, and as soon as things start to go pear-shaped, the pace really picks up. So the second half of the book is a lot faster. There is a paragraph that I wanted to read, and it is from the end of the book, but it doesn't really spoil anything, but it's just kind of an example of Kellyanne Bradley's writing style. She says, "Forgiveness, which takes you back to the person you were and lets you reset them. Hope, which exists in the future in which you are new. Forgiveness and hope are miracles. They let you change your life. They are time travel." I love that. It's so beautifully written. Kellyanne Bradley also did include some information about the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror that were en route to the Arctic. So it gives you a bit of the history of the story. There is the daguerreotype of the real Graham Gore, which is what inspired this whole story. And the other thing that's included on the covers, there are these two illustrations of, I think it's the Erebus, from memory. Yeah, they're both of the Erebus. That are drawings that Graham Gore actually did. They survived through to this day and have been included in the book, and I just think it's really interesting. This is a new favorite. So that wraps up my bookstore recommends me books. I feel like this is fairly successful. I mean, this by far and away is one of the favorite books I've read this year. I feel like even though the Rainfall Market didn't kind of live up to my expectations, it was still a really interesting story and has some really cool concepts that I was really enjoying, and The Night Librarian was just fun. This is great for anyone who is a fan of literature. This is where we are. We're finished. Thank you for watching. In the comments, I'd love to know if you have read any of these books or if you are planning on picking any of them up. Otherwise, feel free to leave some kind of time emoji down below to let me know that you're here. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.